Close this here a little bit. So, okay, get ready to start here. Just a couple of announcements really quick. My name is Keith Seelan. I'm an anthropologist, ufologist, and a little bit of a futurist. But I'll do a formal thing in just a minute or so. Just curious. I always do like surveys of stuff. Everyone here from the U.S.? Okay. No out of international visitors at all? Okay, very good. What I'm doing here is that I've been coming to Roswell for quite a few years, and I'm just going to offer a promotion. The reason I have this shirt, I usually wear something different, but personally, I'm in a running group back home where we do like running races and fitness, walking, things like that. So I'm offering this as a promotion for anybody that Roswell here has it's called an alien chase, and it's a 5K or a 10K or a run or walk. So in other words, you can walk this. So my promotion is going to be this, that I'll be running it tomorrow, and if anyone wants to join in, now remember, you don't have to run it, you can walk it. You can walk a 5K, but if anybody is interested and comes to the Roswell Recreation and Aquatic Center tomorrow morning, does a 5K run or walk, and shows me this, I'll give you a free signed copy of, actually it's going to be this is my latest title or whatever, Will E.T. Talk With Us. So it's not a challenge, it's just something for you to get out there, get some vitamin D, do some exercise and things like that, and then bring this back to me at my table out there tomorrow or Sunday or whatever, and I'll give you a free signed copy of the book. So that's out there for you, preliminary. I'll just throw that in as before we get involved here. So in any event, I will formally start this in just a second. I can leave this curved a little bit. So, and it's just going to open right back up again. So it's okay. I'll just leave it like this. In any event, welcome to Roswell. For those of you, has anyone been here before? This is all your first time? So some of you have been here, and some residents, or just out of time. Great, very good. Again, my name is Keith Seeland. I am primarily an anthropologist, ufologist, and a little bit of a futurist. I study people. In other words, the mostly our ancestors. Those people that created the architecture, or not the architecture, the archaeology, the trinkets and the pottery and things like that, that the people that make the archaeology, that all the other scientists actually study. So no one really studies the people involved and whatnot. So my connection with all of that in ET, and especially for specifically here, I just want to introduce you that our civilization and our species has had a long history with ET and experiences and whatnot. Now, again, as I title this part, More Than Roswell, we know that the governments are not going to disclose that ET exists. It's a power and control mechanism that all governments will not cede up or give up or anything like that. We know that ET will not probably come down. We can't expect it to reasonably, although it would be easy for them to do so. So we're left with one, other options, but by far the best option to help prepare us for relationships with ET, and that is my purpose here, is to help introduce you and help prepare us for a plan of action to get those relationships eventually going with ET. So that whole thing involves my study of ancient cultures, human beings of the Neolithic, of the last 10, 20, 30, 50, 70,000 years ago. I'll ask you too, I won't have a lot of writing on my slides here, so what that, hopefully you can listen to me, look at the pictures, and if there is a slide with a lot of writing on it, I'll go through it specifically for you. So we got a lot of information to cover. I hope that we'll be able to, get through everything for you. But in any event, the thinking points I'd like to have you keep aware of. When studying our ancestors, their minds, their awareness of their environments, the cosmic awareness, the archaeoastronomy, the resourcefulness, the intelligence, and the intuition that they had. Basically, I maintain that our ancestors were us, and we are them. Genetically, we're the same as them. We could swap DNA with them. Their minds thought the same way as we did. Their attitudes, their behaviors, their power and control mechanisms, and some of the ritual, the ceremony ritual behaviors and things like that. We're all the same, so we can study our ancestors from tens of thousands of years ago. This is the hope and the plan to get what I call enduring global relationships, the EGR, is that we can have relationships of a sort like that. Now, I mean, realistically, we know that that's probably not going to happen, but this is just my pictorial demonstration of showing what a purpose is and where we can come to an end point for that. So, as I maintain, we are them, they are us. So, as I go through my talk here, just keep those thinking points in mind, and then I'll show you an awful lot of their resourcefulness through the architecture and the symbolisms that they left for us, but an awful lot of what I call out-of-place mechanisms, those things such as you see here, the pyramids. And again, maintain and keep in your mind the attitudes and behaviors of our ancestors and studying them, and the power and control mechanisms that were developed when the urbanization happened, when cities were first formed and the hunter-gatherers kind of became extinct or whatever. The resourcefulness that they had, and we must give them a lot more credit than we do for them. And as I mentioned, some out-of-place incidents, events, manifestations of their cultures. So the attempt to understand their minds through their accomplishments, as this example from Luxor in Egypt that I had the fortunate ability to travel to pretty recently. When you turn around from that spot, you look down this road and you see the Avenue of the Sphinxes. It's 2 miles long. You see all of these sphinxes here. There's 1,000 recorded at the Egyptian Museum, 1,057 of them. Look at the artistry to go along with such fantastic structures, and that says nothing about the temples themselves, which were monumental in scope and in construction. So, and this is not just one culture that had this. This is a characteristic of ancient human beings universally through all cultures. One of many, many, many universal, like I said, characteristics of human existence back then. So they were able to express to us many of these features of their lives through symbolic representation. That's the mechanism that allows for us to learn about them and maybe learn some more things about how they lived their lives that seem to be better than the lives that we've made for us today, and helping us again in our plans for maybe developing the relationships with ET. So I'm going to take a deep dive into their spiritualism, the night sky and the day sky, but the skyscape, everything above the terrestrial ground that they walked on, was the most important thing in their lives, bar none. The night sky represented heaven and hell, and was, as you'll see later on, the keyboard of the gods, so to speak. The gods wrote through the constellations and all the phenomena, the comets and the asteroids and things like that, to them instructions for how to live their lives, but also became part of their fabric for their they're living, so to speak, their balance and their interconnectedness with all their environments, the great chain of life, everything around them. So keep those things in mind. Now, in becoming Neolithic, meaning at the end of the last ice age, when climate became conducive for human beings to then flourish and thrive, these are the factors, and again, as human beings, we would have to experience all these things in the same ways that they did. Natural selection just means the genetic changes that come through nature and just living through generations, the ecological, the climatic, and the biological changes that happen to a species all throughout and in a relatively short time. Reproduction development just has to do with how a culture raises its young. Food production, water and famine, those are the most important things for us today as it was for them back then. If we don't have food to eat, water to drink, we don't live, we don't survive. We're them, they're us. Geology, geography. Geography meaning that there were certain areas of the world where when the ice age ended, such as the now known as the Middle East, Asia Minor and that, the climate became more favorable for human beings to thrive in communities as opposed to the North and South America, the Western Hemisphere. It took a lot longer for the climate to adjust and the geology to adjust for us and for them. Socialization and the thought revolutions of all human beings and what became and what was manifested from people now living in close quarters and communities and whatever, introducing the concepts of power and control, war, disagreements, whatnot, new labor infrastructures, and food production and whatnot. It's the mind that was the most important thing. So, like I said, they took a lot of their cues from archaeoastronomy, and they were acute enough, they were resourceful, and they were intuitive enough to recognize and observe the patterns and cycles in nature. And as we do today, they all existed back then as they do. This is a point that I'll read. It's got a good quote that'll summarize this really well. They carefully observed the comings and goings of its celestial bodies. They peopled it with beings whose epic journeys affected the rhythms of their own lives, beings who wove human destinies into the fabric of eternity like the finest Navajo blankets. When we study archaeoastronomy, we have to remember too the time elements involved. Cultures such as Native America, a lot existed in the last 2,000 or 3,000 years, but when you're talking about a culture like Göbekli Tepe, which is 12,000, 13,000 years old, you have to remember, and especially with archaeoastronomy, you're reading the skyscape, the night sky, which is going to look vastly different 12,000 years ago as it does today. That's a point to keep in mind as I move through here in a little bit. But basically, to summarize, they're using their minds to interpret in their time what their symbolism meant. The night skyscape and the things that were important to them were the moral codes and more essentially the spiritual aspects of living and of honoring ancestral worship, including their deceased chiefs and leaders like that, and the gods, deities, and because they didn't have the knowledge that we do today, technically and otherwise, E.T. to them was actually gods with the fantastic range and their capabilities as compared to the indigenous, the natives of back then. So let's take a dive in. I've had the pleasure recently to do many journeys, as you'll see here through, this is through Turkey, the tepes as I'll get into. I was just in Peru and Bolivia about 3 weeks ago. So bienvenidos from Machu Picchu. And this here is an example of, as I'll mention a little bit as time permits. These were skulls, or actually fossils from ancient pre-Incan people. The South American, the Andean cultures go back far further than the Inca of the last few hundred years. This is one of those out-of-place phenomena. It's called the Nazca mummies. I visited the museum at the ICA University, where researchers are investigating mummies from 2,000 years ago found in the Nazca region. And as you look here, you see, just real quick, you see the appendages and the toes and whatnot. The big question is circling around, are they really human? And it's indeterminate yet. There has been some DNA studies that the 3 universities involved, 2 of them have not released their data, and they don't plan to release it even after getting grant money from the governments to do so. And the 3rd one is still pending as far as conclusions. The survey around the world takes us here to prehistoric Egypt, to where people existed way before the dynasties and the building of the pyramids and whatnot. And in Egypt, you think of it as just a whole big desert nowadays. But this person here, this being existed probably only about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago in what is now the Sahara Desert. This is the effect of climatology and the changing landscapes of ecology and the end of the Ice Age or whatnot. So there remains to be very many things probably hidden in the Sahara that we'll have yet to find, but will be fantastic when we do so. So these next couple of slides here, I'm going to show you all of these. These are all tools that dynastic Egypt used throughout their existence from about 5,000 years ago up to now. They used those tools and those tool kits to build things like that. This is one of those, as you well know, out-of-place artifact type of things. This is 4th grade arithmetic here. To build this pyramid, according to the scribes that left their communications to us as to the details about its construction, that to build, to quarry, move, shape, and put into final place a stone that can weigh up to 100 tons would take, you would have to, and taking 22 years, 25 years, or even longer, 24/7, 365, 25 years, you have to place 4 stones a stone every 4 minutes, 24/7. And that's regardless of day or night, and all the considerations about labor infrastructure, having enough food for their population to eat, and all the other accoutrements that go with living day-to-day life for 25 years in dynastic Egypt. Did the humans have help or whatnot? That takes us way beyond the discussion and the time that I have today. But if you want to stop back at my table sometime this weekend with any of these points, yeah, we can go into a conversation about some of these things. So, even more fantastic is the alignment with the compass points, and like I said, in connection with the skyscape and the horizon and everything. Why did they do things like this? These things are so precise, in accordance with the 4 cardinal directions of north, east, south, and west, and other mathematical crunching accoutrements that other researchers have found. Why did they do things like that to that precision? And another aspect of this is there's a lot of controversy swelling around. Were the pyramids built by Khufu and his son and his grandson 4,000, 4,500 years ago? Or were some of these structures existing a lot before Khufu took power, control, and ownership of them? So that all comes down to sacred mathematics, sacred geometry, knowledge of counting, but not numbers. So, all right, was ET involved in something like this? Another thing here to do with the unfinished obelisk and having to do with the quarrying, the fantastic nature of quarrying and moving 150-ton blocks, 700 miles down the Nile River to be able to place them at various points throughout their kingdoms or whatever. So Just fantastic how they did it, and you can, in your own mind, decide whether it was human beings that did all those things, and I'm not advocating that it definitely was not. Again, we got to give our ancestors more credit for the accomplishments that they made than this. So I bring this up, the Temple of Hathor, the Dendera crypt. Who here is familiar with the Dendera light bulb? I'll call it a hypothesis, I'll be nice. The controversy over Egypt had electricity, and they had light bulbs such a shape like this to power equipment and things like that. Has anyone heard of the Dendera theory? Okay, well, I'm gonna kind of discredit this whole thing here. It's not a battery, or I mean, it's not a light bulb, it's not a battery. Basically, what this represents is, and you can see it here in different aspects. This was a depiction of a story involving Harsantis, who was the son of Hathor and Horus of the Hathor temple. This is a ceremonial depiction of the transport of the soul of Harsantis into the eternity. This is the Milky Way. They saw it above them. That's all that it is. I'll go back here. This is the god Hay, who was the navigator, the captain of the ship, the day or the night barge that transported the soul of Harsantis across the Nile from the east to the west, as the path of the soul of his, the journey of his soul to the Milky Way, which was heaven and eternity. They used the symbolism and the metaphors of the lotus flower, which is very sacred to their existence. This is not a filament. This, again, is the Milky Way. So it was the transport of the soul of Harsantis with the goddess Nut holding up the Milky Way and supported by the Jed pillar, which is a manifestation of Horus himself, to successfully transport Harsantis and show him the path of souls into eternity. That's basically all that is. So it's not an ET type of a thing. It's not an out-of-place artifact where they had this advanced technology. And again, the archaeoastronomy, in helping them tell their stories, they scribed what they saw. They put it in their symbolism, whatever. So another aspect of ancient cultures, a universal aspect, was that when they came together as cities and villages and whatnot, the power and control, the attitude and behavior mechanisms that we exhibit today, we inherited all of those features and psychology and neurology from them. Another example, this is another site in ancient Turkey called Kamalhoyu. Not as old as the Tepes. This is only about 9,000 years old. But you see in the symbolism, you see a slow transformation of power and control. In this aspect, the animals are in the control of the wild environment. They're depicted as being much larger than human beings. As time went on and as cities developed and continued to live, the balance, the tipping point between animal power and human power swayed and then eventually favored human beings. The weapons became better, their intelligence, they learned more, they applied their knowledge better, acquired new knowledge to the point where, as you observe more recent symbolism, more recent glyphs and whatnot, those animals in their depictions became smaller and smaller and smaller, and the humans became larger and larger and larger. It was in their minds that they had to reconcile this power and control mechanism. And this psychology also applied to dealing with individuals and communities, the governing of cities and whatnot. So all part of the mind, the human mind of back then. Another fantastic aspect, and I'm not attributing any ET manifestations to this, was the soul and mummification. Just the idea of the soul. Where did our ancestors come up with the idea that humans, and by extension all life forms, have souls that are either reincarnated or continue on after an earthly existence. Those are just fantastic abilities that they had, intuitions and resourcefulness, that they didn't have the technology with which to answer those questions. So this was actually a tomb. Their animals, Egypt's animals, in many ways became deities, as they were worshipped on the same platform pretty much as the gods themselves. Before I leave Egypt, one other kind of fantastic thing. This is Akhenaten. This was the revolutionary Egyptian pharaoh who wanted to move away from a multi-theistic existence. Instead of multiple gods, we should be honoring and worshiping just one God. So he lived 1,500 years ago before Jesus Christ. So Moses also, by the way, and it's known that he lived in Egypt and the famous migration into Israel and whatnot. So there's a lot of Abrahamic, Christian and Judaic and Islam influence and activity going on, and Egypt is a big part of a lot of it. So let's switch over to my recent visit, waving from Peru and Bolivia, Machu Picchu. This is an example of a culture that the Inca people of today said that, yeah, they did occupy it a few hundred years ago, but a lot of that stuff was there long before what they did. And this was for all the older Andean South American cultures. The Viracocha was the creator god, the creator being that was followed by all the Andean cultures from Tiwanaku, from tens of thousands, potentially tens of thousands of years ago, it's suspected. So what was amazing to me about South America, besides some of the personal stuff, like today, the food there is fantastic. It's world class of food, but that's beside the point. The engineering, the architecture, as you can see here, it defies our attempts to duplicate and replicate. This is not a really good example. Here we go. We get in, and these are examples. This is from Machu Picchu. This was a temple and an altar and whatnot. Look at the architecture. There's no the masonry. There's no cement that's joining any of these things together. These blocks are formed geometrically precise enough. They can fit together, and we can, as in many civilizations around the world exhibited this. You cannot get. We tried this. You can't get a penny. You can't get a piece of paper. You can't get a razor blade into any of these. And they are also earthquake proof. As you can see here, the Andean region gets major earthquakes worldwide. How they put this, the most extreme worldwide, measuring 9.5 or maybe even more throughout their long thousands of year history. But yet, after all these events and episodes and whatnot, you can see that most of this architecture stayed together with a couple of exceptions here and there. Another proof that of their expertise in building earthquake-proof architecture and other sites, Sacsayhuaman, you can see the walls around there and these blocks. And incidentally, to place these blocks weigh a lot more than 10 tons, and they are a lot older than the Incan empires. Look at that. This gives you little clues about how they may have moved them into place. Sacsayhuaman is a different example from Machu Picchu. The quarries that they had are pretty much on site, so they didn't have to move them, miles and miles, as opposed to like Machu Picchu, where you've got it's a sheer cliff, 90 to 85 degrees down for 3,000 feet or more. So this is not quite so fantastic, but the masonry involved and the cuts are so precise, and they're not 90 degrees, but they fit together so well, and they're so earthquake and weatherproof that it begs the question, how did they have the knowledge and the techniques to be able to build these? Just more examples here. And they built some worship into their architecture. This is an example of a serpent built into the wall, as you see the eye here. But they built, and then it goes around, swings around the corner, and comes back out here. So they design multi-metaphorical motivations into their system, into their designs in it. Another site here that defies the characteristic Aliante Tambo with all of this architecture. It's just amazing how these engineers were able to go through and do all of their things that they were capable of doing. So we are going to go into another area here, but I'll show you some more fantastic manifestations. These are other areas that I visited around the world. It begs the questions: how were they accomplished by our ancestors? Did they have help? And by studying them, can they help us today? These are just, again, more examples of architecture where they were built into rock enclosures. This is dug down to build the Kalish Temple. Petra Temple is another example. Göbekli Tepe, that was just buried. But Machu Picchu, which is 3,000 feet above the nearest town that currently exists in South America. So universal behaviors, these happened all over the world. All our ancestors accomplished all of these things. Angkor Wat, Cappadocia, Cahokia, which is in the U.S., is an example of Native America. So the archaeoastronomy around all of these fantastic procedures and the construction of their lives and their moral codes and their core existences has to do around the stars and the spirituality that was created from them. As she is, well, she's supposed to be looking in the other direction. I want you to look east here. This is the Sphinx looking out to the east. But 10,697 BCE at the equinox, that's what the Sphinx was actually seeing. It was the constellation of Leo as one very important constellation or writing of the gods, so to speak, that the Egyptian life codes were actually drawn from. Another one here, look at the style of all of the clothing of all of the Egyptians here. Now, Hathor is a god. Ptah is a god. Osiris and Isis are gods. But look at all these other, the style of their clothing. And it's all the Egyptian art has these same types of things. That's what they were looking at. They scribed what they saw. They used what they saw. They saw Orion as a very, very important aspect of their lives. Another constellation, the Pleiades, which had more practical purposes to do with food and migration and its appearance in the sky. It's not a circumpolar. In other words, it disappears at times of the year, but the timing is right to where when it appears, that's harvest time for many areas around the world. When it disappears, that's planting time for the next season. So the first rudimentary aspects of calendar creation and a recognition of patterns and cycles of time and nature on Earth were developed from observing the stars. Back in Egypt, the cosmology behind the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters, but also, like I said, this is a round-the-world phenomenon. I was just in Picara, Peru a few weeks ago. That's actually called glyphs of a sword or whatever, but they also, in rock inscriptions, pecked in and symbolized often constellations of the sky. And an additional aspect, which I will point out here, introduce you to, but I'll get to it in a few minutes in another way, in a more profound. South America especially has that geometry of the trapezoid, so to speak. And they're very famous, known for their folklore about stargates and whatnot into the cosmos. Look at this geometry. I'll come back to it in a few minutes. This was Tiwanaku, that's Pumapuku, and the structure of the H's. So I'll come back to those in a few minutes. So it's just to summarize that universally, all of these constellations, and uniquely to some other cultures, there were other constellations that meant things very important to their existence and whatnot. As an example here, Göbekli Tepe. There's another constellation I'm gonna bring up here right now. These are, for those of you that are not familiar, Göbekli Tepe was a, let me see here. Okay, I can do that. And Göbekli Tepe is a series of buildings, at least the temple part of it, the grand plaza, so to speak, the ceremonial center of the group and the community where they did their rituals. Each building of the many that were there consisted of, in the center, they had two central pillars that served as an altar. I'll show you here in just a second. These pillars were 15 feet tall, many tons to actually get them upright, but inscribed with many different animal features and astronomical features and whatnot. So that's why I put on there more than a totem. You're familiar with Native America totem poles and whatnot. They describe the same story as Göbekli Tepe. So when you say Native America, they had totems from 4,000 years ago. Well, Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years ago. And there's a sister site called Karahan that's 2,000 years older than that. So these pillars served many, many, many purposes. Let's go into buildings A, B, C, and D, which are the four main ones that they constructed. As you can see here, this is an old picture. Göbekli Tepe, it's got not a tarp, but a roof on some of it. So, and it's built more for tourists and stuff than it used to be before. But again, the constellations were the soul to the stars as one very important function of all ancient cultures. You refer to it as God's keyboard or easel. That consisted of stars that all moved around constantly. So they were in different, they had patterns to them, but they were in different positions and whatnot throughout, with the exception of one star. And the reason I say that is I'm coming up to it in just a second. So among the many purposes of these pillars, these totems, early totems, they were anthropomorphs of adorned ancestral leaders that functioned as life stories for the royalty. This was the power elite that these were dedicated to, the ancestors, the royalty that they worshipped. Functioned as life stories, identity attributes, temporally assigned to do with time, celestial maps and chronicles of the path of the souls of those leaders to heaven. Now, Native America is a great example of this. Identity attributes, you hear the names of Native American chiefs, Sky Eagle, or whatever. They took characteristics of animals in nature and attributed them to the person as chief. So if they would run very fast, they were swift deer, or if they were very powerful, they were bear or something like that. So Göbekli Tepe was an attempt also to make that same identification, attribution, in addition to its many other functions for celestial, ancestor worship and whatnot. So these are just examples of one of the pillars, Pillar 43. I'll just take you through a few of these early totems. And you see all the animals described on the sides and whatnot. Let me go back here. This was actually an anthropomorph. This is actually the front. This is the side. You can see the arms coming down the sides of it, and on the tops they don't have heads. They're headless or whatever. But that wasn't that wasn't necessarily important to them. So in going through here, you can see these. Now I'll get into the astronomy part of it. Those numbers there are compass coordinates. Building A is the youngest of the three of them, or the four of them. Building B, by way of its compass alignment, is the next oldest. The two oldest are C and D. So what happened was that these are aligned astronomically to coincide with a certain constellation in the sky, and that's named Hercules. And what they did was they attributed the path of the souls in honoring and worshiping their ancestors and their royalty. The first building, I think it's actually building C. Remember I mentioned that all the stars in the sky move except for one? That one is the North Star. That phenomenon has been in existence forever. That's just the way the physics of our planet and the solar system and all the stars and everything just fall into the motions and everything. Now they saw the patterns of the other stars and everything moving, but what got their special attention was the one star that didn't move. Everything else kind of rotated around it, like Polaris today, the Big Dipper, throughout the year it spins around. In the time dated for Göbekli Tepe, which was 11,500 years ago, the North Star at that time was a star called Iota in the Hercules constellation. It didn't move. The rest of the constellation revolved around as all the other stars did. So that gave special attention. Now, I show the Milky Way here as the phenomenon or the structure in the sky to where, I'll mention that in a second. With Iota Hercules being the North Star back then, I'll give you a little more. This is Polaris. This is currently the North Star that we have nowadays. A lot of researchers are attempting to conclude that what was most important to them was the constellation Alpha Cygni, which was the big bird that's in the Milky Way or whatever. And Deneb was the primary and the North Star for them. But the timing is way off. It's 7,000 years different than the time of building D, where they did their worshiping in Göbekli Tepe. More evidence. Hercules is a vital constellation, was a vital constellation to the residents of Göbekli Tepe. Now, as I show you here, I don't know if you can see this, but this is kind of a bit of a map of the constellation night sky as they depicted it. Now you can see here, it's generally agreed, this bird here is actually a vulture. And the procedure was that the vulture would take the departed soul and transport it towards heaven or eternity. So this was depicted as Cygnus, the bird, the swan, that resides actually in the Milky Way itself. Now, other constellations are represented here, but these two things here, you see that what looks like the letter H and the letter I. Okay, this is mixed up a little bit, but let me describe, keep that in mind, and then for the next few seconds I'm going to describe another constellation here. It's called Corona Borealis. It looks like the C shape in the sky, and it's next to Hercules. As you can see here, a depiction from the summer sky in the northern hemisphere. You can see Cygnus, the bird. This is the Milky Way, going all the way down from the northeast or the north sky all the way down to the south. Next to it is Hercules. This is the what's called the keystone of Hercules, this trapezoidal feature. Remember I showed you the depictions of the geometry in Tiwanaku and other places in South America or whatever? The geometry matches pretty darn well with what they saw in the night sky at the summer solstice, which was just about 2 weeks ago. When we look up today, directly above us in the sky at the solstice is the constellation Hercules, and the keystone, the trapezoidal figure. Next to it is Corona Borealis, the C-shaped constellation. So, building the thesis about stargates and where they got the sacred geometry from, they described what they saw, they attributed what they saw, and they applied what they saw to make meaning towards their cultures in very spiritual ways. And this geometry is all through South America. In addition, Hercules was important as going back to this pillar 18 with all the animals and everything, you can see here the descriptions of the H and the C shape and things like that. That was actually, again, their manifestations of seeing the H shape in the Hercules constellation and the C shape next to it as Corona Borealis, as part of the path of their soul to heaven. Now, this was so much studied. Actually, my friend, Dr. Robert Schock, that he wrote a paper that representing the first written language word that we know of in human history. And the CHCH actually meant God. So here's a summary of the whole thing. The H for Hercules, a gate to the heavens, is a universal ritual. Gate to the heavens is the thought process of all ancient cultures for royalty to travel to heaven, and where the souls resided for new births of people on earth, for those souls to actually reside in, accommodate, and travel to. C is the constellation Corona Borealis. Now, I put the term Axis Mundi in there. This was the spiritual relationship that all ancient cultures had that defined and connected the three vertical cardinal directions of Mother Earth, which was the ground below them, the terrestrial ground which they all walked on, and the skyscape, which included the night sky and everything. All of these things were intricately connected and must be connected for the universe to actually survive. So when a new soul came down to earth and in a new body being born, and then when that earthly body passed away, the soul was guided in some cultures by the vulture, the Cygnus constellation, up to that point. But the soul was guided first to Hercules, actually, in Corona Borealis, then by the vulture to Cygnus, to the Milky Way, after first passing through the, for those of you that are of the Christian following or whatever, the pearly gates, so to speak. You know, where the soul has to reside, or in Egypt, the ancient Ma'at, the 42 ideals of Ma'at that Horus applied to the departed soul to see if the soul was worthy for going into eternity. So that's the decision, heaven or hell or purgatory or whatever. So the soul was directed by through this process into the constellations Hercules and Corona Borealis to go to heaven. So this is a sister site which I don't think we're going to have time for. There's just a minute video here, but I'm going to skip by it because I've already said pretty much what I was going to say about it, but I'll spend the rest of the time here. Symbolic representation in ET, calling card into their minds. This is just a research paper that I published later last year or whatever. It's on my website, which is that anyone can access it. Why glyphs, so to speak? Glyphs were used as an expression to appease seen, unseen, and or deified forces that filled and occupied their lives with stress, tension, and fear. So examples of rock writing, so to speak, go back almost 70,000 years, and probably will be more. And like I said in the beginning, all ancient civilizations, as we do today, we describe what we see. Okay, manifestations through this include phenomenon such as the Nazca lines, and as I show them here, and relate them to a modern day civilization, a phenomenon called cargo cults, in which this represents Pacific native cultures who during World War II saw soldiers come in boats and planes and whatnot, bringing food and water and building materials. Those indigenous thought that our soldiers were gods. The relationship between, you know, like an ET, something fantastic or whatever. So the food and the building materials kept coming, and then all of a sudden the soldiers just packed up and left. Well, in their rituals and their ceremonies, they performed functions to try and attract back the soldiers to keep bringing more stuff. So there's the mind process, there's the psychology and the thought process that existed way back at the time. This is a geoglyph of the astronaut over Nazca. I mean, this thing is hundreds of feet wide and long and whatever. Real quick, and this is a universal way of thought with humans. I just bring this up real quick. This is another, this is the same glyph, but next to it I starred something here. There's another figure right here that I was only able to do a rudimentary, what's called a D-stretch, to try and tweak out detail and whatnot from it. So I applied both things here, but next to this astronaut, boy, it looks an awful lot like a being of some sort that doesn't look totally human. I'll just leave it at that, and I'll try doing more image enhancement or whatever to get to that. But here's a few glyphs. This one's from 30,000 years ago, Chauvet Cave in France, a UFO craft of some sort, and some other objects underneath that lead me into speculation. Why did they symbolize these? The reason I put this reading from right to left is that a lot of ancient cultures, that was a characteristic of them. They didn't read left to right like we do today. Their cultures dictated that their symbolism and everything read from right to left. So when you're trying to decipher petroglyphs and whatnot, you have to take into account the time of the culture that actually did it, but the culture itself to determine did they write from left to right or right to left. So I just show that as an example. But here's other, more fantastic features. This is in Utah, near Sago Canyon. Of all of these spiritual-looking figures, there's another one. Real quick definition: petroglyphs are actually pecked into the rocks themselves. Pictographs are painted on with pigments and paints of some kind. Geoglyphs are what you saw, the Nazca lines and whatnot. So hieroglyphs are just either pictographs, special forms of pictographs, or petroglyphs, so to speak. Here's just some more images from over Nazca. It's amazing. These things are hundreds of feet, or in some ways, a couple of miles long. Why did they do those things? You can't see them from the ground. You have to be in the air to actually do those things, or to actually make meaning. There's the whale, there's the, like a fox type of a thing. These are potentially runways or whatever, but these are the things that run for miles and miles and miles. There's another depiction of another animal and a condor on the right-hand side, and more pictures of there's a serpent there too. So, and the spiral for ceremonial purposes. So, just many examples throughout the world of just humongous-sized symbolism, communications, and whatnot. Back in Native America here, Native America, again, they used this expression for star maps, and here's an example of the Anasazi doing precisely the same thing. A calendar. That was one of the earliest calendars from 2,000 years ago. So they were very keenly aware, and as we go around here, another universal in Ireland, and then back in the U.S., St. George, Utah, Parowan Gap, which describes the 4 seasons. The winter, the spring, here's the summer solstice, and here's the autumn equinox. But they had all these countings for days, and they had practical purposes along with the spiritual for food acquisition and storage and migration and water, flooding, and precipitation and whatnot. So further in America, in New Hampshire, America's Stonehenge had calendars of a similar sort. This is in Cahokia, which is now East St. Louis. It's in the east side of the Mississippi River, about 6 miles in. They had their own calendars here. It was the biggest Native American city with a footprint of 7.5 square miles that existed in Native American history. It's survived and thrived for 400 years, then it just magically disappeared. This was the Grand Plaza, the Monk's Mound, which they built by taking buckets of dirt for many years, many decades, and building a mound that was at one point over 200 feet high, and has a footprint larger than the pyramids. So it was a very, very a prolific and successful culture, but the Woodhenge was their astronomical calendar, so to speak, and they even recognized the positions of the constellations in the night sky. They had to keep building this 4 or 5 times during their existence to follow the path of the equinoxes all the way down the line. So very, very important. Again, another example of the night sky being so very important, and as a final repository and ceremony and worship mechanism for the path of the souls. Cahokia had this also, as was defined and identified here as the Rattlesnake Causeway, in which their ceremonies from Monk's Mound, looking directly down to the south, well, pretty much to the south, on the solstice, this is what the Milky Way in the night sky looked like, and the ceremonies ritualized and adorned the deceased chiefs and kings of that particular culture as part of their worship mechanism. Serpent Mound is another example of the archaeoastronomy. This is located in Ohio. This is one without a drone. This is one of the best pictures I can get. But this is another depiction of it. It's astronomical. It matches geoglyph. What I mean by this is that the structure. This is a ridge, rock ridge that it's built on. This is coming to the northwest. North would be in this direction here. This ridge matches the geoglyph's orientation of the night sky. It just so happens they didn't create this. The ridge existed, and that was where they decided to build as the highest altitude point in the whole valley. So again, it was used, the solstices and the equinoxes were of the extremely important calendar delineations and triggers for ceremonial celebrations and ancestral worship and things like that. So I'll just skip back. So as you would see, Serpent Mound, this is pointed towards the northwest, but you've got this tail. It's supposed to represent a serpent, but the tail is exaggerated. And it's confounded researchers since it was started to be dedicated study for over 150 years. They just thought this was a tail, but a tail of a serpent like that doesn't exist in nature. What this is a Native America sign. This is a petroglyph, so to speak, a symbol, and basically all that symbol means is when you're looking at this whole thing as part of the celebration, look up. And when you look up, you're seeing the Milky Way, which celestially speaking, the compass points all match what the Milky Way is depicted upon to those people at the solstice to help them guide their ancestor celebrations year after year. So I'm just going to pass by that one. So as I've got just a few more minutes left, I would like to show you some of their, here we go. Some of the meaning behind their spiritual compass and the things that guided their lives throughout. They had a moral code, and this is a universal, as related to what I call the great chain of being, or the tree of life. And it's those aspects of what a tree represents. The tree has roots, it has a thick trunk, it has many branches, it has leaves that fall off each year and grow new each year, patterns and cycles. And the tree, if left to its own devices, keeps growing for hundreds of years up into the sky. So all of these characteristics and aspects of living in ancient times, rebirth and immortality, the leaves dropping off and individual growth, the tree itself growing, new branches and whatnot, family roots, the roots underground, again, grounded roots, fertility. The tree is reborn, new leaves are born, and keeps growing year after year. Peace, harmony, and balance, and all of the interconnectedness between This was the moral code that guided all of their lives back then. Many examples of the tree of life through Egypt, the flower of life, the North American tree of life, and Abydos is just it's from Egypt, but the Osirian was the temple where this inscription was actually found of the flower of life. But the Bodhi tree is a Hindu characteristic, path to enlightenment. Egypt, life, heavens, and the afterlife. Christianity, after the Garden of Eden, or originally before that, but what happened to Kabbalah and Judaism, good versus bad universal themes. And as I said, they're all universals then, but do we have knowledge, and do we dare, or do we practice any of those things today? So I'm going to just give you, for the last couple of minutes here, zip you through here. This is the Native American representation of the 4 cardinal directions of life. As you can see, color-coded and whatnot, but all of the attributes of living a harmonious, balanced, productive, successful, and peaceful life, which are things that we just don't seem to have much of today. These are the 3 vertical cardinal directions of the celestial, which I mentioned, the axis mundi, Mother Earth, the terrestrial Earth, and Father Sky, with all of this. And this is also represented in Saco Canyon on the Fremont panel, the tree of life from there. My theme throughout this whole talk, the heavens drove our ancestors' existence and essences. Tree of life is defined here. I just had to get rid of that vandalism that was actually on there. And note that the spirits, these red-colored, basically non-human types of beings or whatever, which were applied there at a time before the tree of life was inscripted here and whatnot. So again, to review the 3 celestial, vertical, and 4 cardinal directions of life. So here's their tree of life. Middle Earth, in their interpretation, Father Sky, the underworld, Mother Earth. This is a creation story, actually, where again, another universal, where after the Great Flood, which is known to have existed throughout the world, all of the humans had to go underground for a while. This is their reemergence, according to some tribes in Native America, where they moved from underground up into, and as you can see here, this is an example of a Native American, a person seeking out the Middle Earth and access to the sky world. Now this is important also, as if you look up at the Father Sky, so to speak, this is actually another star map, and it's actually a good fit with the Perseus and the Andromeda Galaxy and the Perseus star system or whatever. It served as a calendar in addition to a moral code and an essence for actually living. So one other thing as I wrap everything up, this is an example of papoose, but look at this. Kind of looks a little bit, not more than a little bit, like maybe a craft of some kind with a kind of being. So bringing up extraterrestrials. So as I say my final goodbyes here from this talk, I'll just give you an inventory here. These are the Nazca mummies here, and these are the 2 scientists who are trying to prove, are they human, are they not human, are they partly human, or whatnot. But as we go through here, these are from all over the world through ancient history. Many examples. This is just a few days ago, ant people in Native America, in neighboring Arizona here, the Zuni and the Hopi tribes. Thousands of ant people that lived at the end of the 3rd Hopi existence underground, and then the beginning of the 4th existence was that after the Great Flood, they emerged back, humans emerged back to Earth. As we go through here, they're describing what they saw. Examples of beings that don't at all look human. A story here of a crow and the circle coming out of its mouth. It's warning of something that's happening. This is what it's warning about. This is not a tornado. It's a craft of some kind with propulsion and its capsule above on the top here has some kind of rays indicating in Native American languages light rays of a sort. So the crow is warning of the potential of maybe harm or whatever from a spacecraft of some kind. Here's a person who in representations, he's upside down, representations of a dead person. The circle in its head, it was not very smart, it was dumb in something that it did. And look at this object here, doesn't really look human at all. So there's many examples here, as you can see, potentially a craft there of some sort. Another example of that, very spiritual, ghostly type apparitions rising up through, you see other, and again, this is all over the world, potentially an alien morph creature of a sort. And as we go through here, and I will make my final basic statement here. If anyone, feel free, I'm here all weekend. I am speaking tomorrow in the big room next door to here. So as I end here today, I will basically say that we need to learn from our ancestors, that we're talking about planning our future and a future with ET. I just showed you that we have an awful lot to learn from our ancestors in terms about practicing both an earthly and a cosmic existence. And beyond the ET, help us, in our lives, in our culture today. Do we live in the best life that we would want to live in? Is there room for improvement? Can we do things with that? So ET is waiting for us to develop these traits before they make permanent contact. These are my 3 books I currently have out. I've got a 4th one that's in editing right now. It's going to be that title, and it's going to be a deep dive about basically a lot of the things that I talked to you about now. So there's my website. Everything that can be found about me is under the Humaniverse or the Humaniverse Guide. So, I want to thank you all. Without you is the most important aspect of these whole conferences and festivals. Without you, these festivals don't happen. So, thanks a lot, and hopefully some of you want to, if you have questions or whatever, I can be found at my table or throughout the weekend. That's it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
I didn't have changes. Oh, no, yep, come on up. I can, that's the other thing I'm going to be doing is just turning my camera off. But,
start digging into Fibonacci.
okay.
Like Fibonacci spirals and how they're, you see them in flowers.
Yep.
And shells
Yep.
and such. And I had to do something and they said, well, you gotta pick a 7-digit number. So I said, okay, fine. Use the first 7 digits of the Fibonacci sequence and see somebody track that.
Okay.
But it kind of fascinates me as part of the secret geometry.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, they were